pulse of the background screening industry. Brought to you by iCubed Advisors.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to iCubed Advisors. I'm joined today by Scott Paler, a shareholder at DeWitt, and my partner, Jason Morris. We're here to talk about new news with the CFPB, the Trump administration, a lot of rumbling about the regulatory agency. Scott, you want to kind of fill us in? What's been going on the last few days?
Next to nothing, Kevin, I think is fair to say. Yeah, certainly big news, I think, for the background screening space. The Trump administration has essentially delivered a message to the CFPB that it's supposed to stop all current work. The other thing that came down is that it effectively was, at least temporarily, closing the office for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau as well. So the agency that I think all of us viewed as the primary regulator for the space is sort of in limbo right now. And I think what we're all trying to sort through is, where are we and what should everyone do, if anything?
Yeah, I was going to ask Jason a trick question. You stole our thunder, Scott. I was going to ask Jason to say, what is the CFPB? Because sometimes it's a mouthful. Jason, what are you kind of seeing and hearing as we've talked to a number of people inside and outside the industry this week?
So thus far, and this is just my opinion, Trump's been like a bull in a china shop since he got into office with the executive orders and the mandates and this and that. So nothing too surprising there. I just used this line with somebody else, but it seems like it's all page one out of his book on making deals. You ask for just completely irrelevant stuff in the beginning to negotiate down to what you actually want. So I don't know if this is that, or this is, and that's what they're doing with all the different agencies with how they're funded and everything else. I don't know if he's tearing them down to bring them back up. I don't know. I don't think anybody knows. I don't think he knows. But what we do know, and I think that the three of us can agree on, is the CFPB's now been around for over 15 years. I think it went into production in the 2008-ish. And, I think we can also agree that it was somewhat of an overreach that they decided to start regulating the FCRA when the FTC had been doing a fine job of it over, for the last 35 plus years. So for our interests, I don't know how much the regulatory part of the FCRA under the CFPB is needed. But the chilling effect that it's going to have on the banks and financial institutions and all these different things, the CFPB was created because of what happened in 2008 with the financial crisis. So there are things that banks were doing and things that lenders were doing that caused that crash, and that was there to regulate that. So, I hope that there's still some regulatory stuff in place that keeps some guardrails on the banks and the financial institutions, but I can't say that I'd be very disappointed if they stop regulating the FCRA, because it's not really in their wheelhouse. I mean, it's not what they do. It's not what they were formed for. So we'll see.
What do you think, Kevin? What's your take? Jason gave us a lot to talk about there. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think one of the things that always strikes me in the industry is that I think there's a lot of over talk about the significance of the CFPB, right? So we all go to the PBSA conferences where the CFPB, representative is invited to come and share their informal thoughts, right? And there's lots of talk in the space about what the CFPB is up to. I would say, I can tell everyone, based on my practice, the overwhelming source of concern on the compliance side and the legal and risk management side lies with the private plaintiffs bar. And I fully expect that to continue. To me, the CFPB has more functioned on the periphery, right? So I was thinking this morning, where is the CFPB, or where has the CFPB historically had a concrete impact on the background screening space? I can think of three things. One is that they have come out with a handful of advisory opinions.
Yes.
So last year they pushed I think an overly aggressive position that any request for a consumer report by an individual was effectively a full file request. And it meant that theoretically, if background screening companies were going to comply with that advisory opinion, then background screening companies would really have to engage in a very burdensome heavy administrative response to the most mundane request in the world, which is just a request for a copy of the report, right? So that type of advisory opinion, we always thought in and of itself, it wasn't effective. It's not a law, but it could spur private plaintiffs' attorneys to bring novel cases, or it could encourage courts to take a more aggressive position in their court opinion. So, that I think tentatively is on ice. We certainly don't expect to see advisory opinions in the near future. The second thing, I think on a concrete level, the CFPB has been moving ahead with potential new regulations to treat more entities as consumer reporting agencies. So as we all know, wholesalers or data brokers have operated largely outside of the FCRA construct, and the CFPB was making a push in recent months to expand the number of entities that would be considered consumer reporting agencies. That, again, is something that appears to be fully on ice for now. And then the third thing is that they have brought a handful of enforcement actions against consumer reporting agencies. I think it's important to realize, as you guys alluded to at the outset, that the CFPB focuses on much more than just the background screening industry. It's really the banking industry that I think is their primary bread and butter. But they have brought a handful of enforcement actions against background screening companies. As far as I recall, almost all of those, if not all of them, have been brought against credit bureaus, right? So they have really focused only on the largest entities in the space and tried to bring big actions and create multi-million-dollar fines with the idea of getting attention. But for the small, medium, large CRAs, they really probably haven't seen the CFPB much. So I think those are the three areas that they've had a concrete impact, but it's mostly been on the periphery. And I think for now, those types of things are on ice.
Yeah, I think there's some good thoughts there, Scott, and I'll save my tongue-in-cheek jokes, for later. But certainly the worry of researchers across the country, providers, to use the generic term in our space. I've had a few panicked calls with a client late last week and this week around, hey, am I kind of considered a CRA2, or will I be, or what will happen in the future? And I agree with the sentiment both of you shared, that nothing, I don't expect, like you said, an advisory opinion anytime soon. And Jason, I know you have a bunch of thoughts, so I'll let you hop in. Part of me is sad, not because we as an industry welcome more oversight. I don't think because the CFPB, and listen, this is not a political comment, but it's a political comment. There's been one party that has tried to defund, declaw, delegitimize the CFPB since 2009. And this may be the year that they get their wish. But I don't think this returns the industry to 2004, 2005, pre-PBSA, pre-accreditation. You get contemporaneous notice, and you get contemporaneous notice, and you get contemporaneous notice as a business strategy. Those newer to the space and they didn't live in that world, and those of us that are older do, where your business had to compete with, you were complete, accurate, and up-to-date shop, and you were competing with the contemporaneous notice shops, and that was a business war. I don't think we're going back to that. But there's certainly, like, especially we talk about things outside of our realm, consumer protections, banks, mortgages, car loans. It makes me sad to kind of see some of that oversight go away. And Jason, I know you wanted to hop in.
Yeah, I mean, the administration has done a fantastic job of making regulation a pejorative term, if that makes sense. I mean, and I agree. There has been so much government overreach over the last 20 years, and there's some regulations that have been brought to the table that have been ridiculous. But at the same time, and under the same vein, speed limits are government regulation, and I like speed limits, right? What I don't like is things like the Corporate Transparency Act, where I have to give one part of the government information somebody else already has in the government. Like, it's just stupid. So Are we overregulated?
Duplicative, repetitive. I
Oh yeah,
understand.
totally. So are we overregulated? No question. I think everybody agrees with that. If you've ever been to the DMV, you agree with that, right? But one of the things that regulations also do, which is why sometimes background screeners should welcome it, is it sets the rules, right? We all know what the rules are,
Yes.
and we can all comply with those rules. The FTC did kind of a crappy job before the CFPB of issuing opinion letters. They did it for a while in the early 2000s. They just completely stopped. So at least we knew that somebody was thinking about the FCRA when the CFPB was formed. But again, rolling data brokers in and all these different kinds of threats they've had over the years, without input from the industry would hurt the industry greatly. So I really kind of think that at the end of the day, this is going to be a lot of nothing, because again, and Kevin and I have talked about this a lot, and when I talk politics, I bring this up a lot. This is the first time in history over the last 20 years that we're seeing the sausage getting made, and it's ugly, right? We used to see, you read in the paper that government was looking to do this, they brought a bill, they voted on it, here's what happened. Now we're saying, well, this person's thinking about this and this person's thinking about voting for this. Like, we just don't know what the end result or the end game is for this, but we're going to find out soon enough.
I want to tie something you just said in, Jason, and then get Scott's thought. Um, Scott had mentioned, hey, this and paraphrasing, it doesn't mean lawsuits go away, right?
No, that's going to be the
And
biggest part of this.
and one thing I think of the CFPB, right? And they had the two advisory opinions issued in January of last year. One was around the full file disclosure. But I remember 3 years ago when regulators in Washington said, name match only sucks. Really don't think that fits the definition. And to your point, Jason, like those are rules, those are guidance. People can conform to that. They understand. And Scott, without those communications, advisory opinions, etc., it can be harder for screeners to kind of know what is and isn't kosher. You want to expand on that thought around what this may mean for future litigation?
Yeah, I think, I think like you guys both just suggested, the litigation is going to continue, right? The FCRA remains fully in place. Nothing about what the Trump administration has done today changes that. All of the regular plaintiff side attorneys in this space remain in place. Nothing about Trump's movement in recent days changes that either, right? So we're really talking about a narrow slice of the regulatory pie right now, and one that historically hasn't had a huge effect. But I think to your point, Kevin, which I think is a great one, we've all worked with businesses and worked in businesses for a long time, and predictability matters, right? I feel like that's one of the lessons that I've internalized the most, is that, most of my clients and most of the companies that I myself have worked for, they can figure out how to do well in business. They can figure out how to conform to rules, so long as they know what the rules of the game are. And although I don't think that this one CFPB issue in and of itself injects enormous unpredictability, I don't think it does. I do think we're entering an era where the rules are potentially less clear. And I do wonder over the long term what that's going to mean for every business, not just businesses in this industry.
I agree. Again, it
Yeah.
all comes down to the rules. Like I remember, 2003, 2002, Bill Bollinger and some national database people talking about, we have this great new product, and all the screeners are like, it's against the FCRA. You can't do it. You can't do it. And then they issued some opinions. We're like, hey, we have a new product now. So knowing what the rules are, again, incredibly important. And now it's going to be as clear as mud.
And Jason, I am excited, if that's the right word, to see how this does affect, and if Scott, of course, Scott has a front row seat to this, what the plaintiff's arguments are, how the expert cases we work on change, if the arguments become a little different, just how that kind of plays through litigation and the legal system in the coming years. But Scott, I think you said it really well, predictability, stability, right? Uncertainty. Uncertainty is the enemy. We saw the stock market jump up and down a bunch in the last week with, are we going to levy tariffs? Are we not going to levy tariffs? And Wall Street is like, I don't know. And you just kind of see those movements in real time. Any final thoughts as we kind of look to wrap up and see what new news is going to come out tomorrow? We
I
don't need an
think
emergency podcast every day, but I don't think this is the last time we're going to talk about this.
this is not the first time we're going to talk about this. He hasn't even scratched the surface of the EEOC, all these different, alphabet agencies that he's going to try to or threat to dismantle with budgetary ways or other ways. So I think it's the first of many things that we're going to see that'll have some sort of ancillary effect on the industry, and I look forward to discussing them and seeing how it changes the game for everybody.
Yeah. You know what? Before Scott, and I'm sorry to do this, before we do final thoughts, right? Because one thing I think of is the advisory opinions and certainly our knowledge as screening experts. Where do we kind of see and think of consumer protection the most? Yes, the employment screeners get sucked into this, but a lot of this is really a tenant issue. Those cheap $10, $15 Spokio kind of background checks, right? Does this change, Scott, how screeners are thinking about policies and procedures on a practical basis? Like, can they get away with more? Are screeners really thinking like, oh, I don't got that regulator anymore, so I'm gonna cut
Yeah,
corners.
I've seen that thought percolating a little bit, and it's one that makes my hair stand up. I think you guys know me well enough to know that, I'm not a sky is falling person. I'm very much more of a balancer, right, between revenue and reward and trying to figure out a thoughtful path. Here, I think where we're at is it's just a little bit tougher to know exactly what all of the best plays are. To some degree, it remains the continuing mission that we've all had for a while. But I think that the less predictable environment we're entering, is going to continue to raise challenges. I certainly don't think we're somehow entering an age where no one needs to worry about compliance or risk management or legal anymore. I think that would be a terrible misread of this early action of the Trump administration, and I think it would expose background screening companies to significant risk to be taking that perspective.
Well, you bring up a good point, Scott, and I'll try to make an analogy to it, but the FCRA is still the law of the land. There's just nobody to enforce it right now. Now, if they're not enforcing it for all of 2025 and you do something bad in 2025, that doesn't say that when they start enforcing it again in 2026, they can't go back and say you broke the law. It's kind of like I'm not a lawyer, but burglary is still illegal. If you defund the cops to investigate it, they still can go back when they do decide to enforce laws, and arrest you for it. So I think the changes it should make to how anybody in this industry does anything should be zero. I mean, you should still follow the FCRA. It's still the law of the land. You still have to abide by it.
And I would say too, to your point, Jason, I think, to me, the real cops, the ones I worry about are the private plaintiffs' attorneys, right?
Yeah, me too.
The CFPB, the FTC, sure, they've done something here and there, but, they haven't been the primary threat in the space. And so,
Yep.
and, I hope, when I'm talking to our clients about this, I'm certainly pounding the drum of that message, which is just that the real risk remains. The CFPB wasn't a huge threat to you before. It's even less of a threat to you now, but the private plaintiffs bar is fully in place and ready to go.
Scott, you took the next question out of my mouth because I was going to ask you, if you get a knock on your door, are you more scared if it's a regulator or a litigator? And I think you just answered it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if a government regulator is going to start a 2-year audit and come down with a $15 million fine, yes, I'm worried about that
Sure.
too. I would just say, in my practice, that just doesn't happen, right? It's exceedingly rare. So the more realistic problem is the private plaintiff's attorney, and they're certainly concerned enough.
And nothing about CFPB, no CFPB, et cetera, from your vantage point changes that.
Yeah, I think absolutely nothing about this changes the positioning of the private plaintiffs bar to bring cases and to have success with them.
Well, I think that's a
Agree.
great final thought from you. Scott, anything coming up on your end? Any speaking engagements, anything you want to share with the audience?
I'm going to be doing a couple webinars through PBSA coming up in, I think, spring and summer. I think some sort of back to basics boot camp type webinars. So I think those are the next two things that are arising on my end.
All right, Jason, what about us?
Well, we're doing a session at the PBSA mid-year. We've got a couple of webinars coming out. So we've got one we recorded a couple days ago that should be released soon. Hopefully no more emergency podcasts, but you can certainly catch Kevin and I think Scott at the PBSA mid-year, and looking forward to hanging out with everybody there.
Yeah, our emergency podcasts are by far our most downloaded and viewed pieces of content, but it doesn't mean we like doing them or we always have a good reason. Like something happened and it's not necessarily great. That's why we hop on right away to do it. But yeah, like Jason said, we'll be at PBSA doing an overview of the industry. We're looking to do a live from, which we'll be teasing more in the next couple of weeks. We're pretty excited about that. I know as we sit here in mid-February, early bird registration is wrapping up soon. Grab your hotels because the hotel in DC fills up fast. Little plug for PBSA, should be a great conference. It's a good agenda. Want to thank Scott Paler, a shareholder at DeWitt and a longtime friend and attorney in the screening industry, for joining us today. I'm Kevin Bachman, Jason Morris as well. He's off to the slopes. I'm running to the bus stop to get the kids. Thanks for listening, guys, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Scott.
Be with everyone. Thanks for having me.